Come here, Jamie. Look at that.
Look at the size of that thing, Doctor.
Yes, Jamie, that is a big one.
Just a wee laboratory, eh?
Well, obviously, it's grown.
It's like 20 castles in the sky. Are you sure we've come to the right place?
Of course I am.
We don't usually get to where you say we're going.
I got Victoria to where she wanted to go. Why she wants to learn graphology, I have no idea.
Will we ever get back to her, though?
Of course we will.
I'll believe that when I see it.
At the moment, we have other things to worry about. Look at this.
What? Hey, I've not seen that before.
It's not been here before. It's a teleport control. You'd think I never flown a TARDIS solo!
What's it do?
It gives the Time Lords dual control. Infernal cheek. I shall complain when this is over. Now then, I think we'll just dematerialize to avoid their detection beams and slip in quietly.
I thought you said they were friendly.
Friendly? I think it'd be overwhelmingly so.
And why are we slipping in quietly?
Jamie, some of the most brilliant scientists in the universe have assembled here to work together in pure research. I don't want them to know that I've arrived.
Why not?
Think of the commotion. They'll all be scrambling around wanting my autograph. No. I just want a quiet word with old Astari, head of projects. Right then. Splendid. We've hit conterminous time again.
Well, we've certainly hit something.
Oh, Jamie. Right. Follow me.
Hello and welcome to Who Watches Who, a Doctor Who podcast with me, Matthew, and as always, I am joined with...
Hello, it's Scott.
Hello. It is now the start of June, which means we are continuing our look through the Doctors chronologically, and it is the 6th month, so we are looking at the 6th Doctor, Colin Baker. But we decided, we're going to look at something a bit more special than just the 6th Doctor. We figured, we wanted a bit more Patrick Troughton in our lives, so we decided we're going to take a look at the 2 Doctors through the month of June, and it certainly is a Doctor Who story, isn't it?
It definitely is. It's unique to say the least.
Yeah. This episode first aired on the 16th of February 1985, which was a Saturday and at the time of recording, 38 years, 3 months and 15 days ago. At the time, the US president was one Ronald Reagan, while the prime minister was Margaret Thatcher, and everybody was just kind of sad all the time. Some interesting things that happened on this day. William J. Schroeder became the first person with an artificial heart to leave hospital and continue living his life. He would die 2 years later, but that's some pretty nice, advancement in science. China Airlines Flight 006 is involved in a mid-air incident. While there are 22 minor injuries and 2 serious injuries, nobody is killed. Big plane crash. I only put it in because it made me think of Yellow Jackets.
I'm currently wearing a Yellow Jacket shirt, so...
Wow. I'm wearing a giant pumpkin, blanket hoodie thing. I don't know what they're called. It's very cozy.
Nice.
Could you guess what is raking in just all the money right now in 1985?
God, 1985, great year for movies. There's Back to the Future. That's out in the summer, so it's not relevant for this.
No, we're in February. Right at the start of the year.
What else came out in 1985? Transformers the movie, again, came out in the summer. Or was that 1986? I can't remember. Can you give me a hint?
No idea. Let me think. And I don't want to make it too obvious. What's the main star of Daddy Daycare? I think that he is the main star.
Eddie
of that movie.
Murphy?
Yeah.
Okay. So 1985, this must have been 48 hours or... Right? 48 hours?
No. No, never. I've never even heard of that one.
Um,
It's a really famous Eddie Murphy comedy movie.
Raw. Is it Eddie Murphy Raw?
No,
No.
no. Think more. Police. Oh, you're gonna kick yourself.
Is it not 48
kick
hours?
yourself. It's not 48 hours. No.
Okay. Please. Can you give it to me? I don't know.
48 Hours came out in 1982.
Okay, is this another 48 hours?
No. This is Beverly Hills Cop.
Okay. A movie I've not seen. I've seen Beverly Hills
wow.
Chihuahua.
Well, very similar movie. But Beverly Hills Cop was the #1 movie from the start of January way into the end part of March. Like, it was a successful movie back in 1985.
This was the 80s when a movie could be #1 for like 6 months because there was no video release. You know, you have to see it in the cinema.
They just stayed in cinemas longer, and there was less films made. But yeah, it was #1 at the box office for a long time. It's a movie I think I've seen once when I was like a kid. I like barely remember it. I like Eddie Murphy for the most part. He's not like an all-time favorite of mine. I think he's a good dude. I think he's made some good movies, but he's made some terrible movies as well.
He's in Shrek.
Yeah.
I like Shrek.
He is in Shrek. Yeah. But that's all I've got for On This Day. It's very short. It was a very quiet day in history. Not much going on, except for, of course, that plane incident. So why don't you take us into a bit of the writer's corner for this episode, Scott?
Yeah, obviously we've been doing a chronological look at each Doctor this year, and why did I choose this episode? It's basically because there's only 4 other episodes I could have chosen, because obviously the next season after this is Colin Baker's final season, and it's Trial of a Time Lord, which when we're going to do Trial of a Time Lord, it's going to be like an 8-part series for us. So just hold on to your hat. And obviously the season
2 months of the story. Right.
I mean, obviously the season before that, he only did the Twin Dilemma, which is considered one of the worst Doctor Who episodes of all time. So I could only choose an episode from this season. This season also has Attack of the Cybermen, which we've already done. It also has Revelation of the Daleks, Revelation of the Daleks, which I don't want to do 2 Dalek stories in a row, because we're doing a Dalek story next month. And so also it only left me with 3 options, sorry. So this one's the best one, I think, and it's appropriate for this month because it's Pride Month. And we get to look at one of the best gay couples in Doctor Who with the second Doctor and Jamie. So
that's true. That is true. They are the best. They are the best. Yeah.
So this episode was supposed to shoot in New Orleans. It was thought that shooting in America would make the series more marketable to Americans because it was already getting more and more popular in America around this time. The same thing happened in 2011. The opening episode of Series 6 opened in America, which was a great opener. John...
what was the Season 6 opener?
It was the Impossible Astronaut.
Oh, that is a fantastic episode.
John Nathan Turner had been planning to shoot in America for 3 years at this point. He first contacted Leslie Elizabeth Thomas, who had recently worked in a BBC soap opera. She was an American writer. She wrote an outline called Way Down Yonder, set in Florida, with some scenes set in Disney World. But Disney didn't want a competitor company filming on their parks, and John Nathan Turner wasn't too thrilled with the outline either, so plans for an American episode were put on hold until late 1983. Obviously, it's strange because now Doctor Who is with Disney, basically. So they could shoot an episode in Disney World now.
That would be a strange episode.
But yeah, the idea of filming in Disney World is a strange concept in general. I'm not sure why that was thought of.
Yeah.
It reminds me of Escape from Tomorrow. Do you know that movie where they filmed in Disney World, kind of like guerrilla
Yes,
style?
I do. Yeah, they filmed without anybody knowing. I remember. I haven't seen all of it. I saw a bit of it when I was like a teenager, and I heard about the movie, but I've never actually sat down to watch the whole thing.
Yeah, I've seen segments from it through like multiple reviews of the movie. It looks terrible, but it's interesting. It's an interesting project, to say the least. The American production company Lionheart was involved with the funding at one point. However, they pulled out the production at last minute. There's a million things that went wrong with shooting in America because, you know, they would have to pay the American extras like twice the amount because, you know, the Actors Guild of America is more fair, I think, than anything else. And just filming, getting all the equipment and all the crew and cast to America is way more costly. They needed an extra £150,000, which is a lot of money in those days.
That is, I mean, it's still a lot of money these days, you know, but it was even more so back then.
So John Nathan Turner at one point did think of Venice, but he thought it would be too difficult to film there because of all the tourists in August, because that's when we were planning to film this, in August. So, yeah, Venice is obviously a bigger tourist attraction place. So the location changed to Spain in Seville, and rewrites had to be flexible. There was long filming days because every change in location took almost a 2-hour drive to get to, which is insane.
Yeah.
So this episode was written by Robert Holmes, and we've been covering a lot of Robert Holmes recently with Terror of the Autons and Caves of Androzani, which are 2 episodes of Doctor Who which are on a very different end of a spectrum, I think.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Yeah, Caves was fantastic. We loved Caves.
It was definitely up there for some of the best classic Who we've covered, for sure.
So he was contacted about writing this script in autumn 1983 when he was writing Caves of Androzani. Holmes was fairly surprised he was contracted for 3 45-minute episodes instead of 6 25-minute episodes. This was unique in classic Who because this is the only season to have 45-minute episodes, which is weird still to this day, but they tried it out only for 1 season.
Especially, like, I think it works better.
It does.
You know, like there's definitely still some like weird pacing issues and stuff like that, but just from story standpoint, you know, this is the reason like modern Who does the 45-minute thing and not the 20-minute thing, because 20 minutes you have to rush so much information in one episode and then have no information, and it makes pacing so much harder than just the 45-minute ones. It's a shame they didn't continue it.
Yeah, because
I mean the show's on its dying deathbed at this point.
Sadly.
You know, it's only got like 4 seasons left.
Yeah, we will be talking about the hiatus at one point because between episodes 2 and 3, the show was effectively cancelled with an 18-month hiatus. So
Jesus Christ,
it's insane to think about. Just 18 months is still relatively short compared to what we've been through. You know, we're currently halfway through a 2.5-year period without a new Doctor Who season.
Yeah.
So when Robert Holmes was script editor during Tom Baker's run, he suggested a story about aliens who visited Earth at odd times to cull the population because they rather like human meat. This led to the creation of the androgums, which is an anagram of Gormons. They were originally called the Kralons, but it was considered too similar to the Kralls from the Android Invasion from 1975. Robert Holmes couldn't think of a reason aliens would visit New Orleans. Like, the only thing he could think of initially was, are they jazz fans? Are these aliens just huge fans of jazz? Do you like jazz?
Yes.
Then he remembered that New Orleans is basically the culinary capital of America, so he thought it would be perfect to reuse his old idea from the 70s. The race remained the same when the story shifted over to Spain because Robert admits he couldn't think of anything else. So, fair enough, you know. It probably doesn't gel as well as it would have had when the story was set in New Orleans, but I think they still are an interesting race, you know. They're unique for sure.
Yeah.
Some changes in the script included different locations and a lot of jokes about the differences between America and British idioms. I think the story was essentially the same in both drafts, just sometimes the location changes or some lines of dialogue changed and basically the same. One request was that the Sontarans should be in the story, which Robert was against because he didn't like returning monsters, but he didn't think the Sontarans were well used in the last story of the Invasion of Time, so he wanted to redress the balance. He was the guy who introduced the Sontarans into the show, so I can imagine him just watching the Invasion of Time being like, they are just used shit here. I don't like how they're used.
Which is interesting because they're not exactly used great
I
in
know.
this story either. like
they do fuck all. It's very strange how they just don't do anything.
And they look awful.
They look terrible.
Yeah.
Obviously, the second request was to include the second Doctor and Jamie. So Colin Baker was actually flatmates with David Troughton for a decade. He was obviously he was even the best man at his wedding, so Colin Baker had met Patrick a number of times at this point. On the set of this, on the location and set of the story, Patrick Troughton gave Colin Baker a nickname of Miss Piggy on set because of his weight, while Colin Baker called him Gonzo because of his physical appearance.
Well, at least it wasn't like just straight up like on-set bullying. It seems to be like a bit of a cheeky rapport between the two of them.
We're basically friends at this point. You know, we're basically family friends. Patrick said he'd love to do the two Doctors Patrick said he'd love to do the two Doctors at the first Doctor Who convention in Chicago in 1983, just 3 weeks before the Five Doctors aired. Basically, he just had a great time doing the Five Doctors. Nice. The Doctor Who convention at Chicago is also where Patrick Troughton died in 1987, just 2 years after this episode, which I don't know if you've heard of the rumors about what happened to cause his death.
I've not. Is it a asphyxiation type deal, or is it less
kind of. That's the rumor. So basically, he was advised not to travel back to Chicago because of his heart condition at the time, and he was just too excited to meet the fans. Maybe a little bit too excited to meet one fan in particular, according to the rumor. Maybe he invited her back into his room, and he got a bit too excited doing an activity. But that's the rumor. I'm not sure how true it is. I imagine it's not, but that's the rumor that's been kicking around for like the last 40 years.
What a way to go.
John Nathan Turner didn't think about getting one of the female companions from the second Doctor era because it would have looked odd with if Patrick had two sidekicks. He wanted to have a balance between the male and female companion, which we just covered an episode of Patrick Troughton's where he has a female companion and they do fucking nothing. So
yeah, I mean, in this episode they literally just go like, she's away off somewhere right now, don't worry about it. Anyway.
So because of his return, the story was considered the biggie of the season, meaning that Eric Sayward needed someone with an experience. Robert Holmes obviously had written for the second Doctor and Jamie before, and he's written the show for multiple times. He was the script editor, so he was obviously the best choice to write for this episode. The working titles for this episode was The Craylon Inheritance, which was later changed to The Anthrogum Inheritance, The Seventh Amendment, and Creation, which I prefer the two Doctors because it gives you exactly what it is, just two Doctors.
Yeah. It also like fits with the theme before, like the Five Doctors, and whenever there's a multitude of Doctors on screen, the title is always like, oh yeah, this is about the Doctors being here.
Yeah, so it's a shame they don't do it in the modern series, but I suppose there's only been 2 multi-Doctor specials, and you can't call it the 3 Doctors again or the 2 Doctors again.
Yeah.
The production was apparently a bit of a nightmare. Wigs and fake eyebrows disappeared during the route from London to Spain. They ended up in Germany for some reason. meaning that 4 of the actors had to be on standby for a few days. Patrick Troughton basically spent his day at the pool just enjoying himself. And when they weren't shooting the episode, they apparently had the best time. They just stayed in the pool and went to different restaurants and drank all night. And there's a picture of Patrick Troughton and Colin Baker in the pool together, just Patrick Troughton on his shoulders, which is just wonderful to look at. I've sent you that image.
It's nice to know that, like, as much as Colin Baker was getting a hard time from the general public as the Doctor, that being on set wasn't a miserable experience, you know?
Yeah, he seemed to have a wonderful time on set. Just, I think he was the right person at the wrong time, basically, because he is a good Doctor, maybe a bit too prickly for a general audience to enjoy, because he is extremely arrogant, and there's not much redeeming qualities about the Sixth Doctor.
He reminds me a lot of Capaldi's Doctor, where, you know, his Doctor comes in and he's rude and mean and not the Doctor we're familiar with, and it takes fans a moment to actually adjust to, oh, this is what the Doctor's, okay, this is not funny flamboyant man, this is angry man who's yelling at me.
He reminds me a lot of John Pertwee's Doctor as well, because we just did an episode, Terror of the Autons, where he just walks away from his story for a bit because he's so fed up of people around him being too slow.
Yeah, I don't think there's been a bad Doctor. I've said before. I think Colin Baker's definitely underappreciated with his performance, especially at the time, because I think he's fantastic in this episode specifically.
He's so good.
Yeah.
The cast and crew wound up getting heat fatigue. A couple of them got sunburn, and some of the cast got Spanish tummy, which is apparently a phrase for food poisoning, which I've never heard of before this. Have you heard of the phrase Spanish tummy?
No, it sounds very much like 80s phrase that is very insensitive to people of other nations.
Yeah, just a general idea about they cook weird and you can't get used to it cooking. It rubbed me the wrong way as well, but with all that said, do you want to jump into the Two Doctors?
Yes. Let us jump straight into the Two Doctors, episode 1.
Doctor, are you all right?
Of course I'm not all right. What happened?
I think you fainted.
I never faint. I remember now. I felt a weakness. I felt a weakness, and then I was in another place.
Can I get you anything? Celery. That's what you need.
Celery. Yes. And the tensile strength of jelly babies. But I had a clarinet. Or was it a flute? Something you blew into?
A glass of water.
Water? No, don't think so. A recorder. That's what it was. Some kind of mind lock.
Doctor, you're not making any sense.
I am making perfect sense. I was being put to death.
I think you should sit down.
Sit down? They're executing me. Except it wasn't that way. It didn't end like that. So it's not possible.
What is impossible?
Well, I exist. I'm here now. Therefore, I cannot have been killed then. That is irrefutable logic, isn't it?
Don't worry about it.
But the there and then subsumes the here and now. So if I was killed then, I can only exist now as some sort of temporal tautology. That also is irrefutable.
Circular logic will only make you dizzy, Doctor.
The most likely explanation, of course, is that I haven't synchronized properly yet. Some kind of time slip in the subconscious.
Perhaps you should see a doctor.
Are you trying to be funny?
The episode begins, as every episode of Doctor Who in this era does, with the Doctor Who intro. I quite like Colin Baker's intro. It's got a funky vibe to it. It's very much a 1980s thing, though. Lots of like synth and like neon lights going like. It's very cool.
It holds up a lot better than the Seventh Doctor intro, where it's just early CGI. This feels like it hasn't aged that much in comparison. I do like when Colin Baker pops up and it's all multicolored.
I think the strangest thing with him is when his face pops up and then they do like a fade transition to another picture of him smiling.
Yeah.
It's like, of all the doctors that you would have smiling, is this really the one that you would choose for the intro? Like, this is the doctor that smiles?
And speaking of intros, wouldn't this be a lot more fun if it was the second Doctor intro? Because the first 10 minutes is just the second Doctor. It feels like it's the second Doctor story to begin with.
That's what I was about to say. It's very strange that we get this intro, and I can't imagine, like, if you were like a kid watching this, how confused you must have been for the first 10 minutes of this episode.
Yeah.
Like Colin Baker comes on, you're like, oh yeah, another Colin Baker episode. Then the episode opens in black and white with Patrick Troughton, and it's like, what's going on? What's this? But it's really cool.
I have been thinking about this, but he was just in an episode. Patrick Troughton was just in an episode like a year and a half ago in comparison, so it was relatively recent. I imagine if it was more like a 5-year gap, Colin Baker would be the first person you see in this episode. But it got me thinking. This is like the first having a 60s intro with Patrick Troughton would have just been the icing on the cake for me, and it reminds me a lot of what we've been discussing with this upcoming 60th anniversary. How fun would it be if he used the 2008 intro for the 60th anniversary? It'd be wild. I'd be so excited.
It would be wild. But what I really like about this is when we open into the episode, it is in black and white as the Doctor and Jamie are talking, and then slowly it transitions into color. I thought that was really fun and really well done.
Yeah.
And it reminded me a lot of like, have you seen those clips where it's from like Australian TV or something when color TV first came in? It's like some talk show, and then they're like, "Oh my god, what's happening?" Like,
it also reminds me of the Wizard of Oz in a little bit.
Yeah.
I think it would be more interesting if the entire scene set inside of the TARDIS was black and white, and then they step out and it's color. Then I think that'd be interesting. But yeah, I do wonder how many people thought it was just their TV starting to play up.
Well, I wonder how many people were even watching this on colored TV.
True, yeah.
Like my mom, when she was a kid in the 80s, she still had a black and white TV. I think they had a color TV in like the living room maybe, but they like never used it, and then the rest of it was black and white.
When I was a kid, we had a black and white kitchen TV in our kitchen, which sometimes me and my dad would watch The Simpsons in there. So
black and white The Simpsons. Brilliant.
So I don't think for a while I knew The Simpsons were yellow.
But the Doctor and Jamie here, what I like is they both keep their chemistry. They both still feel like their characters. And Patrick Troughton looks fantastic, except for the fact that his hair is now white.
Yeah.
Which when he was shot in black and white, it was very clear that his hair was black.
Okay, so
it seems to have flipped when they put the color in.
This introduces the season 6B theory. Obviously, Patrick Troughton looks like he's aged quite a bit, and in this episode, he apparently works for the Time Lords, which is something that didn't happen in the original second Doctor era, because the Time Lords were only introduced in the War Games, his final ever episode. And they have no idea where the Doctor is until he contacts them in that story. So how is he working with them here? In the War Games, the Time Lords plan to exile the Doctor onto Earth, and they force him to regenerate. But the theory is that before they send him to Earth, and before they force regeneration, they send him on different tasks, and they allow him to keep Jamie for these tasks. Because Jamie is also aware of the Time Lords in this episode.
Yeah.
But in the War Games, he just found out what the Time Lords are, basically. So how does he know the Time Lords?
It would also explain them looking older.
Yeah.
Like Jamie looking older specifically. If he was forced to go on these missions with the Doctor. And the Doctor does explicitly say that he is in exile from the Time Lords, but they force him to do missions in exchange for his freedom, and so they have like plausible deniability if the Doctor gets caught for something. So that sounds pretty believable to me as far as like fan theories go.
And during the third and fourth Doctor era, the Time Lords would occasionally pop up to send the Doctor onto a mission, like destroy the Daleks. We just covered Genesis of the Daleks, where that happens, and we could just cover Terror of the Autons, where a Time Lord pops up and is like, "Oh yeah, the Master's here. Good luck."
Yeah.
I think Robert Holmes just considered this must be a continuation of an aggrievement that existed during the Troughton era, which doesn't make sense because obviously the Time Lords didn't know where he was at this time. So this is obviously a theory that was gathered around in like fan convention. This was a theory that's been generally accepted. Terrence Dicks, who wrote the War Games, essentially canonized this theory in 2005 when he wrote the second Doctor novel, World Game, which has the second Doctor going on missions for the Time Lords. This book actually leads directly into this story, so it's a nice. So if Terrence Dicks, the guy who wrote War Games and was on the show for so long, considered it a part of canon, then it's just canon at this point. Essentially, just canon that hasn't been explicitly said by the show. Really.
Yeah.
And also, last year, Big Finish released a story, a box set for the second Doctor called After War Games, which has the Doctor on missions for Time Lords in exile. So, yeah, it's basically canon, just not in the show, really.
Yeah, but what would be the point at this point in even saying that it was in the show? It happened so long ago that I don't think it's ever going to be confirmed as solid 100% canon, but it makes sense, and I think the pieces fit well enough together that you don't even need to explain it in the show.
And when the Fugitive Doctor first popped up, a lot of people thought maybe she was the post Patrick Troughton regeneration. Maybe Patrick Troughton got injured during a mission for the Time Lords and turned into Joe Martin. That was the theory going around at the time.
Yeah, but instead it was much stupider. And she was just like she was before William Hartnell. She was like the negative 15th Doctor or something.
Chris Chibnall went for the Morbius Doctor theory instead of the season 6B theory.
Yes, which is interesting that the show decided to canonize Morbius Doctor 100% because we've seen those Doctors in flashbacks. They are 100% the Doctor, and this one, which would be super easy and really clean to canonize, has not been canonized properly. That is interesting.
Yeah. I wonder if it will be canonized at one point. It'd be interesting for sure.
There's only so many ideas, eventually at some point they'll be like, let's just do it.
Yeah, there's so many potential timelines for potential more Doctors, because there's also future Doctors with the Curators and the Valeyard Doctor who was introduced in the very next season. The Valeyard Doctor is someone who exists between the 12th regeneration and final regeneration. So there is a lot of Doctors floating around time and space that we don't know of.
But the issue, between the 12th and the final regeneration, no longer makes sense. Canon wise, because there is no final regeneration.
there could be there technically is always a final regeneration if the Doctor gets shot.
If the Doctor dies,
because if a Doctor gets shot during regeneration, doesn't he just die? Doesn't he just die full stop? Isn't that the?
That's the I don't know if they've broken that rule yet, but that is what they've said at one point in the show. But I'm sure they'll break that rule at some point.
Probably.
But. Yeah, but that just rolls back into the issue I have with the Timeless Child.
Yeah.
Overcomplicate, which is amazing that you could overcomplicate something that was already complicated with the Doctor's regenerations. But it was the fact that Matt Smith's entire being on Trenzalore thing was, I can't regenerate because if I regenerate, I'm dead. This is the last version of me, the Doctor. And then the Time Lords come in and are like, oh, here's even more regeneration. You're okay. But I guess they were just lying. And
True. Doctor Who is such a complicated show because sometimes canon doesn't exist within the show. It's a strange.
There's so much retconning. Constantly.
And also in this episode, when we're on the TARDIS, they mentioned Victoria, which doesn't make sense for a season 6B theory because it sounds like they just dropped her off.
Yes.
So this might be set in between seasons 5 and 6, but I choose for season 6B theory. Maybe Victoria travelled with him for a bit during the Doctor's exile, doing missions. Maybe.
Yeah. Or yeah, like I think that's a small enough blip that you can kind of ignore it as just a bit of a plot hole rather than something that tears the theory down completely, because I think everything else with the theory works so well.
Yeah.
And otherwise, it just doesn't really fit in the canon, does it? So.
Yeah, and again, the Doctor looks visibly older. Apparently, Patrick Troughton just refused to have his hair dyed, which, fair enough. I don't really mind that his hair has changed. He still looks relatively the same.
His face does. His face looks like literally the only thing that doesn't look the same is really his hair.
Yeah.
But you get over it pretty quick.
Compared to William Hartnell, like in 1973 in The Three Doctors, he looks remarkably the same.
Yes. But back into the episode, the Doctor and Jamie have a nice little bit of back and forth. It's nice to see them again. And then they land their TARDIS onto this, they're in like a space station or something, aren't they?
Yeah, in the script it's described as a forest of cubes, like office blocks, linked at the top, center and bottom by service shafts and walkways. And there's also, when Patrick Troughton and Fraser Hines got their script, they looked for every innuendo they could in this story. And in the script, it's look at the size of that space station. Fraser Hines changed it, look to the size of that thing. And obviously the Doctor's line here is, it's massive, it's big, isn't it, Jamie? So I think that's an innuendo right there.
They're so good together. They are, I think, one of my favorite Doctor companion pairs for sure. They've got so much just innate charisma. But they land the ship, the TARDIS, into the space station, into like the kitchen area, and they come out and they meet a cartoon of a man. He's dressed in like semi-traditional looking Scottish garb, like he's wearing like a weird hat and a red jumper and like a kind of a kilt thing and a belt, and he's got enormous ginger eyebrows. I really hate this character design quite a lot. I think he looks really dumb.
Yeah. He also has warts, which are actually just Rice Krispies.
Incredible. But I don't know why they decided to dress him like an alien Scotsman. That's the strangest, especially when Jamie's standing next to him. It's like they're like from the same family. Like
yeah, but this entire opening is very strange because it's very similar to a 1960s Doctor Who episode. We have Jamie and the second Doctor, but yet just everything else feels like it's the camp 80s. This feels like a pantomime villain instead of like a 1960s Doctor Who villain. It's very strange to see the second Doctor and Jamie interact with 80s Doctor Who, which, every era of Doctor Who is very different, but I think 1980s and the 1960s Doctor Who are the most different compared to each other.
Yeah, for sure. But this weird Scotsman dude, he wants to eat Jamie. He thinks Jamie looks very nice, and he wants to eat him up. This is the immediate bit of cannibalism in this episode. It comes around quite a bit, which is a strange thing. But, the Doctor's trying to him, like, no, you can't eat him, he's my friend. And he tries grabbing for a knife, but instead ends up grabbing a cucumber, which audibly, it got a laugh for me. I thought that was really funny.
Apparently, Troughton came up with that in the rehearsals. He was supposed to pick up a knife, but he thought, hey, a cucumber would be more funny. And it's more Doctor-ish as well, to pick up the wrong thing.
Yeah, I think the Doctor threatening somebody with a knife would be strange. Like, that doesn't feel like the Doctor. But threatening somebody with a cucumber feels exactly like the Doctor. But the Doctor is also talking down to this dude because he's like a which I found strange. He's like a lower class citizen or something. He's like, I don't remember the name of the alien. It's like an Andro something.
Androgon.
Yeah, and so the Doctor's like talking down to him and sees him as lesser. And there's like multiple points in this script, especially in like the scene later on when he's talking with Sunglasses Dude, where he's like, why would you give that thing intelligence? Why would you make it smarter? That's so stupid. These things should not have, like, I'm like, the Doctor does not like this specific race of people at all. He wants them to be servants and know their place. Like,
yeah, I saw tweet the other day saying the Doctor is a bit too mean in this episode. At my point, I remember replying to the tweet with, this is apparently season 6B Doctor, so maybe he's a bit more pricklier when he has to go on these missions with for the Time Lord. So maybe that plays into it, because the Sixth Doctor doesn't seem to be too phased by the Androgums in the story. It's the Second Doctor who has the biggest issue, so I think he's more irritable with his current circumstances than the Doctor usually is.
Yeah, that would make more sense. But it's definitely a strange little thing for him. As they're walking through the corridors as well, the TARDIS ends up disappearing, which I guess the Time Lords took control of it to get rid of it. As the lady says, she's like, the Gallifreyans are suspicious of us.
The episode opens up with the Doctor being upset because the Time Lords do have dual controls with the TARDIS. In the opening,
yes.
He does a classic thing of talking to the sky. Basically, the Time Lords are gods.
Yeah. But we then get to a scene with Sunglasses Man, and Sunglasses Man looks straight out the 80s.
Yeah.
Where he's got these like gray plastic sunglasses on, slicked back gray hair, a weird funky shirt. Like he looks like a 1980s like businessman villain. And it's really strange to see him interact with the Second Doctor. But
this guy is played by Lawrence Payne, and he and Troughton were great friends and worked together a lot. They were apparently so alike that Payne would often sign autographs as Troughton, and Troughton would sign as Lawrence Payne.
Right.
Interestingly, this guy lives an interesting life. He was filming an episode of Sexton Blake, which was his big show in the 50s and 60s. He lost his sight to his left eye during rehearsal of a sword fighting scene with actor Basil Henson following a hard sword blow against the side of his head. Peter Moffat, who is the director of this episode as well, so him and Peter Moffat worked together quite a bit. He took him straight away to the eye hospital, and Payne was told that if he could lie still for a week without moving his head, his retina would join up again, and it would preserve his sight. Instead of doing this, Payne went back to work, got hit in a fist fight, and so lost his sight in his eye, which mental.
Which I was wondering, like, because you can see in this, like, his eye is closed the entire time. So I was like, why are you squinting the whole time? But that makes a lot of sense.
Apparently they spent £300 on his glasses in this story, which obviously is quite a bit of money in those days.
That is a lot of money for sunglasses.
During an interview, Lawrence Payne considers this a waste of money because he could have just worn his own sunglasses. He says that one of his arguments against Doctor Who is that they wouldn't spend enough money on the show itself, but on stupid things like glasses. Which he has a great point.
He's not wrong, is he? He's like, Doctor Who, especially right now, like at that time, has a very limited budget. And they are like, let's spend £300 of our budget on sunglasses that legit look like you could buy them for 10 quid.
Yeah. It's insane.
What a waste of money. What an incredible waste of money. But this is the conversation they have here is a lot of what you were talking about with the season 6B stuff, where the Doctor is like, I've been sent by the Time Lords, I'm in exile from them, but they're kind of in charge. It's kind of like a hush-hush scenario. And we find out that the sunglasses guy has been like experimenting on these, what are they called? Androgums?
Yep, you got it.
Yeah, and he's been automating them and giving them... One of them has been upgraded to super genius level, which made me laugh, because that is the most ridiculous sounding thing in the goddamn world.
He only gave Jacqueline Pierce the ability to think clearly, because...
to be a super genius.
Yeah. She was apparently a last-minute casting because the previous actress pulled out at the last minute, and she was only hired because John Nathan Turner, the producer, heard her laugh in the BBC canteen one time, and he considered her to have an evil laugh. So that's the only reason why she was hired. She was also on Blake's. She was also on Blake's 7 for years and years, which is a show we have to cover at some point.
It just keeps coming back.
And also,
but this is where
she co-starred with John Hurt, the War Doctor, in multiple audio dramas. She plays like a Time Lord leader, and she also appears in the 8th Doctor Time War series, where she basically sends the Doctor to boot camp, which I think she died in 2018. She is great in the 8th Doctor Time War series. She is fantastic.
Good, nice, good for her. I'm glad that she continued to work. But this is where the 2nd Doctor gets a little bit on the you're kind of mean side for me, where he compares her to an earwig. Where, he's like, you could augment an earwig where you understood nuclear physics. That's still a stupid idea. Why are you augmenting this person? That's such a stupid thing. This is an insect, a lower being. It's just a strange attitude for the Doctor to have.
Yeah, it's like that episode of the Sarah Jane Adventures we covered, where Sarah Jane Smith is immediately untrustworthy of the eagle people, the bird people. One of them played by David Bradley. You know what I'm talking about? The death of the Doctor. And then she's immediately bigoted towards his people. I mean, at the end of the episode, she's proven right to be bigoted because they were evil all along.
Yeah. And then it's okay. It was fine. It's strange. It's really strange. But we then cut to a guy just doing his job, working at the radio station bit of the ship, and then 3 Sontaran ships show up, and it's like, oh my god, the Sontarans are here. We're all doomed. Which is a really weird way to introduce the Sontarans, especially because we don't see them for another half an hour.
Yeah.
We get told Sontarans are here, and then we just don't look at them for ages.
And even when we do look at them, they just stand around a lot doing nothing.
Yeah.
There's no proper
really
introduction.
Strange. Yeah. And this is also the first time I'm seeing the classic Who Sontaran ship.
Yeah.
Which is just a ball. It's just a spinning ball.
Yeah.
Which looking at which I thought was strange, because I was like, that's not what Sontaran ships look like. And if you look at the modern Sontaran ship, it is they kept the ball design, but they added feet and like prongs to it. So it's like in Flux specifically is the one I'm looking at, where it's that ball in the center and it's got 4 legs pointing down and 4 arms pointing up.
Yeah.
Essentially, which gives it a much more ship feel, rather than just here's a ball.
I think when the Sontarans do pop up in the Sarah Jane Adventures, it's also the ball. So I'm not sure when they face the ball, but it's interesting for sure.
I mean, a ball is an interesting ship design. Not many alien species have just a ball as their ship. But then we cut to the Doctor, the 6th Doctor, that is Colin Baker, doing a spot of fishing.
Yeah.
So the Doctor is fishing, and while he is fishing, for whatever reason, Perry's just got her boobs out. I don't know why. She's bored, and she's just standing there with just her bra on, and then she puts a top on top of that, so it's clearly just for the people, the dads,
yep.
As they like to say, to staring at it. It's all done in a wide shot, so there's no close up of Perry or anything like that, which I guess is better. It's kind of gross. I don't know why they needed to do this. It doesn't add anything to the scene or to her character. It's just there to gawk at, and it's gross.
Yeah, welcome to 1980s Doctor Who, my friend.
Yeah. But the Doctor is fishing, and eventually he manages to get a bite, and he pulls up a fish, and it's a tiny little fish, and it's a very bad looking effect, and poor Colin Baker has to make it look like it's alive by moving his hand, and he throws it back into the water. It's a somewhat of a calm scene that doesn't super add into much story-wise, but it's kind of like a chill vibe. I kind of like it.
We're the fishing, the water dropped 3 feet, because obviously this is Spain, not an alien planet. He's on Spain. No, well, he is on an alien planet, but it's not totally Spain.
Yes.
You know? It's not Spain.
Yes. No. I never thought that. Always thought it was an alien planet.
The water dropped 3 feet because of the heat, so Peter Moffat had
Jesus.
to try and angle the shot in a good way. I think it works. It's fine. Yeah.
It just makes it look like they're on like a cliff
Yeah.
rather than like right next to a lake.
It was over 106 degrees Fahrenheit. So poor Colin Baker in that jacket. That's why he's jacketless for most of part 2 and 3.
That is oh my god, that's 41.1 Celsius.
It's a
That is, I would die. Like,
oh god, yeah. Apparently, you know how Nicola Bryant's clothes are kind of metallic. They're kind of like, in a way, they're kind of like metallic. They apparently made her feel like a roast blanket, so she was melting. You know, last week we talked about how she was wearing hardly any clothes in freezing weather. This time she's melting in hot weather. So poor Nicola Bryant.
Just can't win. Yeah.
The Doctor is fishing for a gumblejack, which is a made-up name. It wasn't intended to be an alien species, apparently. But, you know, I guess it is an alien species because it's a made-up name.
Why else do you need a made-up name? Like, oh, this made-up name was for something other than the alien species on the sci-fi show. What? Why did you make up that name? Like, where did they get it from, if not to name the fish? Like,
this scene does serve plot purpose for a point that the Doctor is intending to catch fish to cook it, because this is a big theme of the episode about meat eating and how eating people are bad, you know. You can tell vegetarian wrote this episode. Stinky vegetarians. Imagine being a vegetarian.
yeah, who knows what that's like? Not me, for sure. But what I do kind of like about that is this is Doctor Who tapping into something that was culturally going on at the time. Like, the 80s was a big time in vegetarianism rising up and becoming more and more popular, you know, and it's just progressively increased since the 60s, really.
Yeah.
But it broke into the mainstream again in the 80s and became like a new wave sort of thing.
Apparently,
and then died down again, and then
apparently
back up
by
again
the
right now.
end of the year they filmed this, Nicola Bryant turned into a vegetarian. So within 4 months she will be a vegetarian. I'm not sure if that was a lifelong commitment or. But it's interesting how this episode probably affected her.
It's you know, it's always good to think about what you're putting into your body and where it's came from. And, you know, I don't want to get too preachy, but I am better than you. So, you know, that's just how this thing works.
Yeah, but
it's a point-based system, and I've got more points.
Don't you watch Yellow Jackets and think, yum, 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 that's a tasty looking heart. I just want to nibble on that ear.
No, not once have I ever thought that.
It's incredible. We're recording this the week after the season 2 final of Yellow Jackets. Cannibalism allegedly, you know, maybe we're getting that secret episode that's definitely coming out. Definitely 100%. They have a whole secret episode. A bit of context, me and Matthew are part of a Yellow Jackets group where people just keep asking stupid questions about the show that's already been addressed. It's a garbage group. It's insane how stupid people are.
Yeah.
Nobody watches the show in that group. They just ask all the dumb questions.
Just ask straight up, like, basic plot questions.
But yeah, obviously the link between Yellow Jackets and Doctor Who is cannibalism. It's not a spoiler to say cannibalism is part of Yellow Jackets because the show opens up with cannibalism.
Yeah.
It's a great show. You should watch it if you haven't.
It's on Paramount Plus here in the UK. It's worth your time for sure. It's an easy binge, and it's only 2 seasons for now. So, and you've got plenty of time to catch up because oh boy, they're going to be a while before the next season.
Yeah, this writer's strike is going to last a while, and there's also going to be a potential directors or actor strike as well.
And actors, yeah.
It's going to be a nightmare. At least we have Doctor Who.
That's pretty great.
Oh, did you see that Radio Times article where they're basically like, oh yeah, Doctor Who isn't going to be affected by the Writers Guild strike?
I did not. No.
But obviously, as a writer guild
It
of
makes
America,
sense. It's Writers Guild of America. Yeah.
Why would you
yeah.
need to write that
Why would you-
article?
Yeah, the British shows aren't on strike, just the American ones. Like,
I wish a British show was on strike. I don't need any more Coronation Street.
but they've I don't even know. It's not a show I ever think about. But we cut back to the second Doctor as he's yelling at the sunglasses man about how it's completely morally wrong and how that he's here because there's something wrong with the time. There's like some timey-wimey stuff going on, and like time is at a breaking point or something. But the second Doctor here, he gets extremely angry, and it's really fun to see Patrick Troughton act angry, where he's just like yelling and shouting, and then Jamie kind of like laughs at him, and he's like, "What do you think you're laughing at, you hairy like?" Just like, it's a very fun scene until, of course, Sunglasses Man suddenly dies. Like he puts his head down on his table and he passes out, and he's like, oh my god, he's been drugged. What's going on? And then gunfire starts going off, or specifically laser fire, which the Doctor's got a weird line where he's like, I thought you'd recognize that sound being a Jacobite, Jamie. I'm like, they don't have lasers during Jacobite times. What are you on about?
And then the Doctor tells Jamie to run away, and Fraser Hines does a weird run where he just kind of
hilarious.
It's kind of like a little jaunt across the room. He's not running fast.
No, it's no panic on him. He doesn't even like protest. Or the Doctor's like, save yourself, and he's like, okay, bye. Like, but then the Doctor gets a Sontaran hand holding their dumb looking gun where it's just like a stick at them. I'm not a fan of the Sontaran weaponry at all. There's a lot of Sontaran design choices that just aren't great, isn't there?
I'm not, to be honest, I do like the Sontarans, but they don't get too many good episodes, I don't think. They're kind of like a weaker, because there's not much plot to them. I think the best Sontaran story I've experienced is the Ninth Doctor Sontaran story that we covered in one of the audio dramas, where it's a race of good Sontarans who don't know anything about war.
Yeah.
That was amazing.
With the first female Sontaran, there was the female Sontaran.
That was amazing. I loved that story.
That was good. I think it was helped that you couldn't see the Sontarans and see how silly they look.
Oh god.
I liked when they came back at Flux to start with. That was fun until they immediately ruined it with chocolate.
Yeah, the episode of Flux was a highlight. They were in the War of Sontarans, but I imagine going back to it isn't good because it's attached to Flux, and I don't like Flux as a whole. So, as a weak side of doing like a mini series as opposed to like a proper series of individual episodes, if you do a really good episode, it's attached to the entire season, so it's harder to be connected to it.
For sure. If you were watching this on YouTube, by the way, I'm very sorry. My cat has become extremely curious as to why I'm talking, and it was just walking in front of my webcam the entire time there. Wait, don't bite the cable. Stop it.
What did your cat think of the two Doctors?
Hated it.
Did your cat like all the fish talk?
Oh my god, stop biting the cable, you're gonna die.
This is the kind of content people subscribe for.
Oh my Christ. Hang on, I completely pulled my webcam. Oh. There we go. Just sit in my lap and be a good cat. Nope, immediately back to the cables. Brilliant. But anyway, the story continues as we cut into the Sixth Doctor as he's back inside the TARDIS with his umbrella up, which is interesting that he would have his umbrella up inside and not outside.
Yeah, it's bad luck,
but
isn't
it's
it?
super
But
hot.
I guess you opened it outside. It's opening an umbrella inside. That's bad luck.
Yeah.
7 years bad luck, is it?
That's breaking a mirror, isn't it?
Oh, I don't know.
7 years.
But if he has 7 years bad luck, how does a Time Lord get that bad luck? Years is relevant to him.
I think you'll find out that luck isn't a real thing. And that's how it works, because luck doesn't exist. So, but the Doctor, I really, really liked this scene with Colin Baker, where he's like, I've not really been feeling myself. Like, I don't know what's going on. And like, he then collapses, and we cut to the second Doctor being tortured by the Sontarans. He's just like, he's got like a blue light on him, and he's like, this hurts, ouch. And from there, we actually transition very nicely into Jamie watching the second Doctor and being like, Doctor, where are you? I'm coming to save you, until the cannibal comes. And then he cuts the cannibal and he hides as the lady comes, and they start having a back and forth like, you're augmented. That means you think you're better. And she's like, you're right. That does mean I think I'm better. And maybe you should watch yourself, sir. Huh. And then that guy's like, I want to go to Earth and eat all the humans because they look very nice. It's like a nothing scene. I don't care about this cannibal dude at all, and I don't care about the lady at all, even if she does bear the sacred blood of the Franzine Grigg, which is something that they make sure that like it's an important sounding name, and it's like, this is I am never going to remember that name at all.
I remember surprising a little about this entire episode as a whole. I remember watching all 3 parts to it as a kid. I don't remember anything apart from obviously the Sixth Doctor and the Second Doctor meeting, which we don't do for a long time. I remember silly looking Sontarans. That's all I remember, to be honest. Colin Baker does a great fall here. Like, Jesus Christ, he falls flat on his face.
Yeah, with no crash mat or anything, because we panned straight down. So he just had to fall on that hard studio floor, and that would have sucked. That would have sucked so much. But yeah, consummate professional. But we then cut back to him waking up, and this is the scene where I think he shines as the Doctor, where he's like trying to work out like what's going on, and he's like, there's a nice bit of continuity even with Perry when she's like, do you want some celery? Would that help you feel better? Obviously, because in Caves of Androzani, we learned what the celery that the Fifth Doctor had was for, which was it made him feel better, or it was like a cure for poison, or just like the taste.
It turned purple if there was some sort of like poison in the air or something, right?
Yeah, and then he could eat it, and it would either save him or at least he's eaten some celery. But and then he's like, yeah, and maybe get me some jelly babies as well. And didn't I have like a flute or something? And he's like, what was it? And like Perry's got a line. She's like, maybe I can get you a glass of water. And he's like, no, it wasn't water. What was a recorder? It's like I love that bit where he's like, no, I wasn't blowing into water. What are you talking about? Like, he's just not listening to Perry at all.
Yeah.
And then of course we get a famous GIF moment where Perry's like, maybe you should call a doctor, and he's like, are you trying to be funny? Which is a GIF you used on me just today.
Yeah, just when I was waiting for you, and you're like, I'm not going to record today. I want to go back to bed. And I said, are you trying to be funny? I fucking love Colin Baker in this scene, and
he's great.
Nicola Bryant is also very good. It's very funny. They spent a lot of time together in this episode without any other actors, and it could be boring with any other 2 actors in the lead. They do a good job of making boring scenes fun because they just have great chemistry straight from the bat.
They do. They do have great chemistry.
I love how arrogant the Sixth Doctor is, though. It's such a great, fun character. Straight. It's so funny.
I thought it was whenever in this episode Perry suggested something to him and he was like no, and then a few minutes later he would make the suggestion like it was his idea. Like,
oh, that's what the fucking
brilliant.
That's what the Third Doctor did in Terror of the Autons. Remember that one episode where Joe's like, well, why don't you just go to maybe it's connected to this, and then the Doctor's like, no,
shut up.
And then 25 minutes later, he's like, oh, maybe it's connected to this. Oh, it is connected.
Yeah,
to
if only somebody's told us that it was connected to this earlier. Like, but the Doctor starts going through his big list of like other famous people and doctors or whatever, which has got like Da Vinci and stuff. There's a joke about Christopher Columbus being a genocidal maniac in it, where he's like, oh, Christopher Columbus, he's got a lot to answer for, haha. and eventually lands on the name Dastari, and he's going to go off shooting to go find him.
The Christopher Columbus line was ad-libbed by Colin Baker. I'm not sure if it's directly addressing the genocide, or does he look at Perry during this scene? Because obviously Perry is American.
He goes like Christopher Columbus, and then he like tilts his head over to Perry and is like, "Oh, he's got a lot to answer for."
I think he's just referring to Perry in this scene.
I don't know. It feels like, it could be taken in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But personally, I would like to think the Doctor would hold somebody that isn't them responsible for genocide. Because famously, the Doctor does go on to adore a genocide and use it at every waking moment that they can.
And the fact that Chris Chibnall was aware that he wrote the Doctor in a way that the Doctor liked genocide, and he addressed it in Eve of the Daleks, and there's no like resolution to the arc of the Doctor enjoying genocide. There's no point to it. The Doctor just loves destroying Daleks and stuff.
It's the weakest. One of the weakest parts of Chibnall's era was the Doctor just beat every enemy by that enemy dying, either at the Doctor's hand or inadvertently at the Doctor's hand. Like the enemies didn't survive or learn their ways or get arrested, or they just were like, we died, we're dead now. You did it, Doctor. Yay.
Remember when she killed the TARDIS by jamming like a billion Daleks?
Yeah, and somehow that TARDIS didn't destroy the entire Earth. Yeah. Remember when she weaponized race? What a good time. But
God, there's going to be one day where we don't mention Chris Chibnall in this podcast.
It's, I feel like it will be such a long time, because I think even when the new stuff comes out, we will still be comparing that new stuff to the Chibnall era stuff. And it's just such a... because obviously this podcast started during the Jodie era, so that is where we have so many thoughts, and we've talked about it so much, and we've analyzed it so much, and we've been excited and disappointed and gone through all the emotions in a public scale of being a Doctor Who fan during the Jodie era. And now that we've got a new era coming in, it's impossible not to compare it to the older stuff, which is... I think it happens all the time. Like when Jodie was in, you couldn't help but compare it to the previous era with Capaldi and Matt Smith, where you're like, used to be like, what's going on with these scripts? And then when Capaldi was in, especially his first season, you couldn't help but compare it to previous seasons, where you're like, God, they don't know what they're doing anymore. Like they've ran out of ideas. And then with Matt Smith, a lot of people were like, oh, he's no David Tennant, comparing it again. And then with David Tennant, everyone just kind of loved it because it was still new.
Being a Doctor Who fan is rough. I imagine watching Doctor Who during the Colin Baker years and being like, what the hell's going on? The Doctor is so unlikable now, and all the stories are so dark and grim. Like this one's about cannibalism. What's going on? Why is Doctor Who so dark? This is for kids or families. What's going on? And this next scene was supposed to open up on a montage of shots showing the empty space station with a bloodshed lab jacket, and there's supposed to be a lot more dead bodies lying around, but because you need actors to have these dead bodies, so that was dropped. But having because
they spent £300 on sunglasses.
Having a load of corpses in this scene would have felt pretty dark.
It would have, but I feel like I don't mind when Doctor Who gets dark. I quite like it. And like for this, when they come into the space station, all the lights are off. They're like, something's wrong. They're like, there's the smell of corpses everywhere, and they do find like a bloody jacket on the floor, but there's no bodies. And I think the addition of having some bodies lying on the ground would make it feel like, oh, something has definitely gone, like someone's been attacking these people, whereas it takes them a bit longer to figure that out. Where like when the Doctor's walking around the station, he's like, what's going on? Oh wait, someone's been attacking. This isn't just like the station's been shut down. Someone's purposefully destroyed this place, whereas the dead bodies would kind of make that a bit more obvious. So dead bodies would make it darker and more cool, but also would shorten the runtime. So but yeah, they're walking through this space station, and they're like, it's very atmospheric. It's obviously the same space station that the second Doctor was on, but now all the lights are off and there's these weird purple 80s lights everywhere. And I really like the vibe of it. I think it looks really cool. And eventually the Doctor starts talking to a ship's computer, where he's like, what's going on here? What's happening? And Perry's got a great line where she's like, how do you know you're talking to a computer, Doctor? And he's like, but do you think I wouldn't recognize a computer when I'm talking to one? Jeez, come on.
The computer is voiced by Lawrence Payne, the same guy who voiced Destrati, who is, I think he does a good job with a computer voice because it's very different to the guy he plays in the actual episode. Yeah,
for sure. I would never have made that connection. It does just sound like a decent little computer voice. But then they're like, the Doctor's got another great line here. He's just full of them in this episode where he's like, there's only like death traps and laser beams and all this sort of things to avoid, so we should be completely fine. And Perry's like, oh good, I thought you were about to say that we were in danger there. And he's like, nope, as long as we keep our wits about us, we're completely fine. And then he like steps over like an invisible laser or whatever, which Perry has to follow in, but an alarm starts blaring and the oxygen starts getting sucked out of the room. And they have to start trying to like fix it up and stuff like that. And the Doctor manages to do it within like the brink of time, but not before Perry passes out, which like he just picks her up and like fireman carries her out of the room, with his hand in some certain places.
I mean, it's not as bad as we've seen worse.
We've seen Tom Baker was worse. Yeah, for sure.
Tom Baker almost grabs Harry Sullivan by the penis in one episode. He gropes that alien lady in the hand of fear.
It was the alien lady I was thinking about, where he just kept touching her boobs.
When you're carrying someone on your shoulder, it's hard not to touch certain bits of the body. So
for sure, yeah.
There's also a great line where Colin Baker's like, who would try to shut down their scientific research? And he's obviously referring to himself.
Yeah, because he's like, this place is great. They weren't doing anything wrong. They were just researching for research's sake. It's brilliant. When we just heard the second Doctor argue against how brilliant that was. But yeah, it was very fun.
Sure. I do like seeing all the differences between the two Doctors and how they can disagree on one topic. It's such an interesting life to live when you live multiple lives.
Yeah.
Like we're different people. It's so fascinating to me. It's so weird.
It's such a good idea for alien/hero of a show.
Yeah,
it's great. Anyway, the episode continues as we cut to a very nice looking villa in Spain. And weird Scottish cannibal guy and his lady friend that's augmented are walking up to the front door and just nonchalantly have a Sontaran with them. They really don't make a big deal about the Sontaran being there, about joining them, about just like getting off the ship and working with them. The Sontaran's just here, and like this is our introduction to the Sontaran, like seeing the Sontaran physically, and it's just like, oh yeah, I'm just a dude, I'm just here. Also, he's really tall. He's a really tall Sontaran. He's a lanky guy.
There's two really tall Sontarans, except one is shorter than the other. But which is what you want for a clone army.
That's what you want for a clone army. Is they all look different and aren't really clones.
Yeah, but Sontaran's not matching up is like the one thing I remember, because I kept on staring at it as a kid. I'm like, but they're supposed to be clones. They're supposed to be really short. Why are they so tall? Why are they looming over these characters?
Yeah, it's a really strange choice. To how hard is it to find a shorter actor to play the Sontaran? I don't believe it's going to be that hard.
Yeah, they could have gotten you.
Wow, I'm not that short. You're just
plus you weren't born.
Yeah, but it's a relatively nothing scene. They're just like, oh, we can't eat anybody in that house. They're too old. Ew. And that's basically the extent of that scene. It's the Sontaran that's the most distracting.
Yeah. It does give us a hint of one of the best things about this story is the locations and just all the scenery in Spain. It's beautiful work, and also the soundtrack goes for like a classical instrumental Spanish guitar kind of thing, and it works really nicely. Apparently the composer kept on having to persuade John Nathan Turner to use this because most Doctor Who scores were done electronically, and he was like,
Yes.
can we just fly this classical guitarist in and get him to do a few hours of recording? And John Nathan Turner was like, no. he won in the end, like, and obviously it works better for a story to get a little bit more of a Spanish flavor into it.
Yeah, you see, John Nathan Turner certainly made decisions when it came to classic Doctor Who. Like, I feel like he made a series of really good decisions and also a series of really, really bad decisions. And I'm glad he got talked into being able to use non-sci-fi music when they're not in a sci-fi setting, because it does add something to it. Whereas if they were in the scene and the music was going like pew 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 pew, like it's done before, it's really bad, like, and becomes distracting and takes you out of the scene. Like,
yeah,
he had some weird hang-ups. He had some weird hang-ups, that dude, didn't he?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. We'll talk more about some decisions that John Nathan Turner made next week, because there's something else that aired before episode 2 that we need to discuss.
Oh,
and I think you know what we're talking about.
yeah, interesting. But the episode then continues into something not interesting as we cut to the Doctor and Perry in like the office place of the dude with the sunglasses, I'm pretty sure it is, and they're going around and they're talking, and this scene goes on for almost 10 minutes. Of these two talking, and they talk about some interesting stuff, like, you know, the Doctor's like figuring out that it was the Time Lords that intervened here and something's gone wrong, and it looks like the Time Lords have killed everybody, but that doesn't sound right to the Doctor, and these guys were close to figuring out time travel and what's going on here. So he's basically figuring out why the second Doctor was sent back or sent to these people, even though he's got no memory of it happening, because, I don't know, flux, don't worry about it. But this scene just doesn't stop. Like, there's moments where you're like, oh, okay, we're going to cut away, and they just keep talking, and you're like, oh, okay, we're done now, and they just keep talking, and then you're like, oh, but now we're done, and you know you're not, we're just halfway through.
It's a 6-minute long scene, and it's just the two of them going back and forth together. On the audio commentary, Nicola Bryant and Colin Baker are like, isn't it wonderful that we could just have a 6-minute scene without cutting to anything? Because, you know, nowadays TV has to cut to like 9 different scenes within this scene, and you have to cut to like 9 different things happening, and it's like,
yeah, they have to make it interesting.
Yeah, we have to make it interesting. This is just the standard of like 1980s television.
See,
I don't
mind long scenes where it's just people talking. Like, that's my bread and butter. Those are the type of scenes I absolutely love. It's just what they're talking about isn't interesting.
Yeah, and,
they're not having a compelling conversation about morals. They're just like trying to figure out what's going on, which is information we already know.
Yeah, this scene really could have just been 2 minutes long, and it would have been perfect. I don't think it needs to be 6 minutes long. It's probably just padding. You know, it's a 45-minute episode. We have to fit in some padding in general. It's a 3-parter. It's insane to think about. We got 2 more weeks of this.
Although, like, to be fair, I'm okay with padding when it's just people talking. It's much better than padding when it's just people walking around in silence, because that's even more boring. So I guess I could, if it's the lesser of two evils. Yeah. But eventually the computer turns itself back on, and the Doctor and that manage to open up the doors and get out of the room that they're in. Not really. I don't know if they don't really stumble into any new information in this scene, do they? They just retread.
Not really, no.
They just retread on stuff we've already known. And then we cut to a little old lady who's inside this like villa place. She's all Spanish and talking Spanish. And then when the cannibal guy comes up to her, she's like, "Oh my God, you're in English!" And then he kills her. So like that's a really important scene. I'm glad it's there.
But it is quite fucking dark though. It is quite dark because this woman did nothing wrong. She's just an old lady. It's sad.
But you know, but this is also where we get a really good look at the Sontaran. And it's honestly horrifying. It is a horrifying Sontaran. Like, his armor doesn't fit properly. He looks like he's wearing a bin bag. as his like chest. He's got really long eyelashes. Like a weird like squished chin. The entire rubber of his face is so cheap. It looks like a rubber mask. It is like a Halloween costume. It is possibly one of the worst looking aliens we've covered on the show. Like
his chin looks like an old man's testicles.
Yeah, like it is horrendous.
As I said,
genuinely really bad.
It's honestly like the one thing that sticks out in my memory about this episode. I don't remember anything else because the whole cannibalism plotline was a surprise to me, honestly. I forgot all about this plotline.
Just remember the Sontarans.
Yeah.
The really tall Sontarans.
Tall boys, I relate.
We then cut to the Doctor and Perry as they're going to go down like this slide thing, but before that happens, Perry sees a dead Androgum who is the exact same actor as the cannibal dude. Which are they like clones? Are the Androgums all the same?
I don't know.
Because
maybe.
Why is the lady different then? She's the augmented one. Why does she look different?
Maybe all the
chef, the guys look the
same. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, it's strange,
but it would probably get very confusing.
Yeah, but he's dead. He's got a big little like bloody circle on his stomach. Perry's quite distraught by this, but the Doctor doesn't care. He's like, that guy's an androgum. Yuck. I don't like those guys. Which is, again, so strange for the Doctor to be so nonchalant about, one, a dead sentient creature. Two, he sees this creature as lesser than him.
Yeah.
That doesn't feel like the Doctor to me. I feel like the Doctor would see a servant race of people and be like, I'm so sorry that you're doing this. I have so much empathy for you. Like what he did with the Ood. Imagine if the Doctor saw the Ood and went, I don't like you very much. I hope you die. Like, they even address that in, like, because when the Ood first show up with the episode with the devil, the Doctor doesn't really do much about the fact that they are straight up slaves. He's just like, okay, I guess we just have to deal with the fact that these guys are slaves, and we'll just go on fighting the devil. But then when they next show up on whatever the Snowy Planet episode is, the Doctor straight up is like, I'm like, last time I didn't have a chance to actually say how I feel about this. This is disgusting, and you guys are wrong. Because last time I was too busy fighting the freaking devil. They retroactively made the Doctor against it, but he just straight up wants these guys to die.
I think the Doctor just knows all about this race and how barbaric they actually are. That's what we're described as on the TARDIS wiki, a barbaric race of like people. So. Yeah, he has no taste for barbaric people, so maybe that's why he's so indifferent. Because if it was like a Dalek, like a Dalek squid, he'd react the same because Daleks are evil. But really, we're not really showing that we're all evil. We just like food.
Yeah, that's it. It's we've not been shown that these guys are worth, like, the Doctor wanting them to be dead. Like, there's one dude we know about who is working with the enemies and is a cannibal. But I mean, is he even technically a cannibal? He's not a human. He's just like, so he's like, I want to eat human flesh because I've never had human flesh. He's just a food connoisseur, like there's nothing inherently evil about wanting to eat meat. It's a natural instinct for a lot of animals. Like.
And he's kind of primitive as well, so it's not like it's more like an urge rather than a decision, really.
Yeah, the Doctor's just an ass. Just an ass.
And also the Doctor and Perry going down like a little hole to, like slide down to another place in the space station is same thing happened last week, with the Caves of Androzani. They also went through a hole.
Yes.
And Perry did a little bounce.
She did. Oh, I think she does a much better job getting down this hole than she did the last one.
Yeah.
Because, like, the Doctor's even like, make sure to raise your hands up as you're going down, and you do see Perry's hands go up just before she slides. So that's a nice little bit of detail that she managed to actually remember to do. There's a funny line here where the Doctor's like, okay, you gotta go down, and Perry's like, what if I get stuck? He's like, oh, don't get stuck, because I'm coming down right behind you, so that'd be a bad idea.
It reminds me of the Simpsons episode where Homer goes to water park, and he goes down the tube and gets stuck in the tube, and they just send
There's-
kids after him to delodge him.
There is an episode of Always Sunny where Mac and Dee where everybody goes to the water park. Mac and Dee get stuck in the tube, and a bunch of kids also get stuck behind them, and they have to try and dislodge.
I saw that
Simpsons
episode,
did
best
it.
episode
Yeah.
ever. Yeah,
It's a good episode, but
It's my
it's just another
favourite.
example. Just another example of Simpsons did it, isn't it?
Yeah. Simpsons always do it.
Yeah, they've done everything. The episode continues as Perry and the Doctor drop into this, like, the inner workings of this building, where it's just like a series of tubes and
Yeah.
walls. I'm not really sure what it's supposed to be, but it looks cool. So it's
Yeah.
got that going for it.
It's more of like a scaffolding set. This was designed
Yeah.
by Tony Burrow, who also designed the set for Top of the Pops at the time, which used
Right.
almost the same style of. We'll be talking about a presenter of Top of the Pops next week. I can't wait.
It'll be great.
Oh
It'll be really
boy.
good. But yeah, I it's a cool like scaffolding-esque set. I really like the lighting. The lighting is what does it so much fit, because it's all like these purples and blues, which it's a very 80s vibe, lighting-wise, and it looks very cool with the Doctor and that.
This is one of the things that again sticks out in my memory from seeing this episode, because it's really nicely shot. Well, it's not nicely shot because it's mainly just static shots, but it's nicely lit.
Yeah, it's well presented.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is very nice. We then cut to the we keep calling him a cannibal even though he's not, but I'm not going to stop calling him a cannibal. So we cut to the cannibal guy and his augmented lady friend, and they're having a conversation. That's basically just showing that these guys still don't see eye to eye, because the augmented lady's like, you know what, I'm better than you, and he's like, how could you think that you're better than me? We're the same. Don't forget, like, you might be augmented, but you're still whatever the hell I'm called. So, that's still in your blood. You're still cool. Which is just, these two aren't really Androgum. They're just not really getting
well done.
along super well. And it's fine. I think they're really boring as far as like villains go. Like I don't find the augmented lady compelling. The cannibal guy, I honestly don't like at all.
Yeah, I know what you mean, and also the Sontarans are here, and they're supposed to be compelling villains, but they don't do anything. They're just kind of henchmen to these two characters,
which is strange for the Sontarans to be like just hench guys. They're just tall henchmen. Like,
it feels. I understand the concept of bringing back the Sontarans would be a good idea, but if you're giving it to Robert Holmes and he's like, I don't really want to write for the Sontarans, you could just have him write out for Sontarans. It doesn't really matter to have the Sontarans back, as long as you've got Patrick Troughton in this episode, because the Sontarans don't do anything.
You could remove them, and this episode plays out the exact same. Like, besides from the second Doctor getting captured by the Sontarans, like the episode would play the same, and you could just have them get captured by a bunch of Androgums. Have like them have like a revolt or something. You don't need the Sontarans. But we then cut to the Colin Baker and Perry, as they're continuing through the pipes, and the Doctor's fiddling around with some stuff and talking about how cables work. And Perry's like, wait, I thought I heard, was that a noise or something following us? What's going on? And the Doctor immediately chews her out and is like, you should listen. I'm a smart guy. You should listen to the things I'm saying. I'm so clever and smart. And Perry's like, oh yeah, it's so great traveling with you, Doctor. I almost die all the goddamn time. And he's like, good. I'm glad you feel like that. Anyway, let's continue walking. It's such a great scene of Colin Baker's Doctor's personality, where he is just kind of a douchebag. He's really smart, knows he's smart, and wants everyone to listen to him while he's not listening to anybody. It's a great. I really like this characterization.
It is wild what Perry still chooses to travel with him. Like Colin Baker just almost tried to murder her a few weeks ago. Yeah, but would the Doctor take her home if she asked? He doesn't listen to anything she says. She's he can't take her home in the first place because the TARDIS is just so unpredictable. So
exactly, she's stuck with him. That must be terrifying. But
I thought in this episode she could just stay in Spain and get a flight to America. You know?
That's true. Yeah. She could just run away. And maybe it's like some Stockholm syndrome stuff's kicked in at this point. You know, she's convinced herself that she's with the Doctor for this song because she must like him. Like...
Poor lady. So sad.
But they continue going through the pipes and tubing as the noise following them continues to get louder. I think that this is where the Doctor's like, hey, wait, there is a noise following us. That's interesting. But he thinks that he's only heard it. It's, again, some great stuff. And they start messing around with the wiring and the piping some more. The second half of this episode, I really kind of struggle with. I find myself like zoning out so much because the first half, you've got fun conversations with the second Doctor, and it's nice seeing him back. It's nice seeing him with Jamie again. You've got fun stuff with Colin Baker and Perry, where they've got like a fun little back and forth. But then when the second half comes in and we haven't seen the second Doctor in ages and we're just following Colin Baker and Perry, the story just kind of stops doing anything because they're trying to solve like what's happened at the space station, even though we already know what happened at the space station because we saw the Sontarans attack and we saw the Androgums like take over and kill everybody and stuff like that. So we're watching them try to figure out what we already know, and it's not presented interestingly, you know.
Yeah, it's a shame because obviously all the Doctor and Perry could do until the cliffhanger is just wander around the space station. There's nothing for them to do, and Fraser Hines is busy being a little weirdo because he's so freaked out at the moment. Patrick Troughton is busy having a nap. And all we really have are these two new characters, Oscar and Anita, who are hunting moths.
Yeah, and it's a really weird scene where, you know, this guy Oscar and Anita, they're walking through the Spanish fields, and Oscar's like, I love moths. They're so cool. They're so beautiful. And he has this really long poetic like speech about how much he loves moths, and then she's like, so why'd you kill them? Why? And I was like, oh damn, this dude just straight up kills moths. And he's like, I kill them so I can look at them, which is counterproductive because you can look at them when they're alive. But I understand the commentary that they're going for here is about like big game hunters, you know, where it's like, you know, oh, I killed a rhino so I could mount it and look at it because like it was an accomplishment to kill it. I just think they're magnificent beasts. But it's taken to the extreme where it's like, you know, what if it wasn't a rhino but something as like small and stupid as a moth? What if you were just killing moths to mount them on your wall? You know, so I understand what they're going for. It is pretty hilarious. Also, the way that he kills moths is mental. He like lights a torch and then traps them in cyanide. Like, there's got to be an easier way to kill a moth than trapping it in a box of cyanide.
I do appreciate this episode does have commentary about hunting animals, eating animals, etc. But I think it does get a bit on the nose when an entire scene is just devoted to a man talking about capturing moths and killing moths, and there's a solid like 3 minutes of him just talking.
It does go on. Yeah, it does go on for quite a bit.
So this scene was immediately after shooting this scene, the two actors were flown back to the UK because they weren't needed anymore. However, they found there was a scratch in the negative, so they had to fly them back.
Oh my god!
Which, you know, obviously costs a lot of money to fly them back.
Yeah.
And when they reviewed the footage back home, they realised the scratch was so tiny it didn't fucking matter in the first place. So they spent like God knows how much money to fly them back out and reshoot this scene.
You know, I bet they were really glad they spent that 300 quid on sunglasses. The
two actors are kind of unremarkable. The lady apparently won a beauty contest or something back in the day, but that's for her. Really all that's going on here.
Yeah. We also briefly cut to, during this whole I Like to Murder Moths scene, we cut to the cannibal guy and the Sontaran talking really about nothing. The Sontaran's like, us Sontarans are in charge. We're the cool guys. Don't forget that. But it's really hard to hear what he's saying. because the mask is like covering his mouth, and they didn't dub in the audio, so it's straight from the actor, and it sounds like he's talking through a mask, so the audio sounds all weird and muffled as he's talking, and it's not good. It's a straight up not good time.
And give me a second. I've got the name
Also,
written down here. Shockeye is eating a watermelon, and he's like, "Oh, disgusting." So it's only for he only eats meat, is what's going on here. Again, it's a bit on the nose for the whole commentary, but whatever.
I feel so sorry for the guy that's playing the Sontaran.
Oh God, yeah.
Like, can you imagine being in that 100% rubber, like visibly rubber suit in that, like, it was like what, 40 degrees Celsius heat in Spain? Like you could not wear that for long. Like you could, maybe that's also partly why it looks so crap. Maybe the heat warped it a little bit,
Yeah,
But,
so yeah, they tried to shoot the Sontarans in as low heat as possible, like at the start of the day or the end of the day when the sun is going down. However, when the masks didn't arrive, they had to reorganize their scenes. So sadly, the Sontarans had to be in quite a bit more. So
that would have been so bad. Like that's a thing that has really come to light for me as we go through Classic Who.
Mm-hmm.
The people that play the aliens have the worst time on set constantly. Like, Sea Devils, people almost die.
Yeah.
Like,
and they still do have a rough time. Wearing a costume is uncomfortable, but at least there's more, or at least there's better working conditions these days, because there's a million ways they can figure out how to make an actor more comfortable under these costumes. Like, you can. You're only needed in this costume for a certain amount of time. You don't have to wait around on set all day wearing this costume. You don't have to drown yourself because we'll just use CGI,
Yeah. It's they've come a long way, monster costumes, and I cannot imagine how miserable the dude in the Sontaran costume must have been. He must have been just hating every goddamn moment.
Yeah. He apparently did have a good time,
Nice.
between the shoots.
Yeah, when he could take the mask off.
And towards the end of the shoot, he was just about to finish his final scene, and everybody was having champagne, and he drank champagne for the straw in this Sontaran costume. So so the final scene he records is kind of him being a bit drunk, to be honest.
Brilliant. But we then cut to, the people that are hunting moths, they see a Sontaran ship fly overhead, and they're like, oh my god, what the hell was that? It sounds like it crashed nearby. What if people are injured?
A massive baseball ball just flew overhead.
Yeah, flies overhead. And they go up and they look over, and they're like, and they see what looks like Sunglasses Man. I think it is Sunglasses Man, and a Sontaran carrying the second Doctor's unconscious body. Which is interesting that they're carrying him when he was getting tortured on the ship. I don't know why he needs to be moved about. I haven't seen the other episodes yet, so I'm sure this will become revealed to me. But they're like, maybe we should go and help them. There's not a telephone nearby, which immediately was like, oh wow, this is the 80s, isn't it? Imagine not having a telephone nearby when you see an accident. God, we live in the future.
Oh god, yeah. Just imagine not having your phone at all times,
Yeah, like
I need to listen to music.
Being somewhere and not being able to communicate with anybody else, like not knowing if something's gone wrong. Like,
oh god, have you ever walked home and your phone just dies and you're like, what the fuck do I do now?
No, I have not, because I keep I use my phone correctly and my phone battery is good. So I keep good track of my phone battery. I'm
good for you. Good
a
for
cool
you.
guy. Yeah.
Good for you.
So I'm
so proud.
not a loser. Not a loser like you. But the episode then reaches its conclusion as we cut back to Perry and the Doctor, and then Perry gets attacked by a dude, and then the Doctor gets zapped and he falls and gets hung up by some cables, and the way he gets hung up is pretty cool. His fall and everything looks like crap, but the way that his body's just hanging there, I kind of like. And Perry's getting like full on mounted by this other guy. It's really weird. And then that's our cliffhanger to this episode. It's a garbage cliffhanger. It just kind of suddenly happens where it's like, oh, the episode needs to end. There we go. The sparks and which is a move that Classic Who does all the goddamn time.
Just the Doctor being knocked out by his own his own behavior. He's too arrogant. He's like, I can fix this, but he can't. And then Perry gets attacked. It's a cliffhanger. Bye. Colin Baker was fitted with Kirby wire and harness, and it worried Colin Baker because of his weight. He was too worried about falling, and apparently he couldn't breathe well during the stunt. So poor guy.
Yeah. I think it's the stunt, like the end part of the stunt, like the image of the Doctor just being held up by these cables is a cool image. Like I see what they were going for. But yeah, that's a shame. But that is the end of episode 1 of whatever this episode was called, The Two Doctors. I forgot Patrick Troughton was in this. Like, he's only in the first half an hour, and he has no interaction with Colin Baker at all in this episode. But what did you think of this first episode, Scott?
Yeah, as you said, the first half of this episode is really solid. I like how bold they are in having the second Doctor be the main focus for the first 10 minutes. It's kind of wild to watch, because even in like modern multi-Doctor specials, you don't get that. Like, it took David Tennant like 15 minutes to appear in Day of the Doctor or whatever. Like, it's kind of wild. They just decided, Patrick Troughton's the first 10 minutes of this episode, of course. We won't see Colin Baker until 10 minutes in. That's wild. That's cool. And
it's also wild that they don't interact. Like, having them not interact for 45 minutes is crazy.
which is a great concept for just a Doctor Who episode. You don't need to have them interact. Like, what if the Doctor landed on an alien planet like 500 years ago when he was David Tennant, and now he's Ncuti Gatwa, and he comes back to the planet and finds out how different it is. And he could have David Tennant and Ncuti Gatwa in the same episode, and they don't interact. It's just like a flashback scene. How wild would that be? That'd be cool.
It would be pretty cool. I feel like it takes a lot of... Like you have to resist a lot of temptation to do a multi-Doctor story and not have the Doctor meet himself, because those are the scenes that people want to see, because that's always the like, haha, fun. But managing to do it, even just for an episode where you have two Doctors in the same episode, they don't meet, it takes a lot of like resisting an easy win. And I kind of applaud it for that. The rest of the episode sucks.
I agree. There's some interesting things here and there, but I think it's just it moves too slowly for my liking. You could tell this episode in like half an hour, cut out a good 20-minute chunk of the episode, because nothing much happens in the second half once Patrick Troughton is written out of the episodes, honestly.
It's very much, though, like, you know, this is technically one episode, but you can feel like if this was split into 6 parts, like, you know, the part 1, you establish it, and then the second half of this episode, this is where the filler kicks in, and nothing's going to happen for a while. Like, it's still following the same structure of Classic Who, even if they have just been like, no, they're 40 minutes now, they're different. It's really not that different compared to the 20-minute episodes.
It's a shame that, you know, when they moved to the 40-minute format, they didn't decide, maybe we can tell a story in one part instead of 3 parts or 2 parts.
Yeah,
because, you know, that's what Doctor Who kind of needed at this point, just a big change. But also the budget wouldn't allow it, because, you know, they spent like 10, well, not 10 days, like maybe 5 days filming in Spain.
You say the budget wouldn't allow it. They spent £300 on sunglasses. They flew somebody back and forth to Spain twice. Like, I feel like they could afford it, but their money was so mismanaged that they couldn't figure out how to do it, because they were spending things on stuff they didn't need to spend.
But, you know, why use a Sontaran for one episode when you can spread them out for like 3 episodes? That's one costume across 3 episodes. A writer, one writer for 3 episodes, actors for 3 episodes, sets for 3 episodes, you know, locations for 3 episodes rather than one. You know, it does all add up at the end.
Yeah, but I feel like you could still do something more interesting with the money. You know, like you've got this money, like you're being cheap with it, and you're being weirdly expensive in certain areas where you're again spending £300 on sunglasses. Where like, you know, sure, you're spending a little bit more on having a Sontaran in one episode, but just have slightly less alien focused episodes. Have a human focused episode. Have them go back in time, you know, have them do some time travel-y stuff, go forward into the future, there's a lot more creative stuff you could do, and I feel like they're just like, nah, we'll keep it cheap, we'll keep it easy, which is, it's some interesting, it's just some weird budgeting. I don't understand the thought process behind it, but
and
you know,
sadly, you know, next season is when the seasons get split in half. Instead of 14 45-minute episodes, it's 14 25-minute episodes. So this is when Doctor Who starts getting split in half, really. It's sad to see.
It's the slow death of classic Who, for sure. The slow agonizing death.
But you know, Colin Baker is fantastic, and he
is.
I understand why a lot of people were turned off with this interpretation of the Doctor, but I think he's really solid in this episode. He's always fantastic whenever we watch him, even though his episodes are usually pretty weak, to be honest.
Yeah, he's never the worst part of his episodes. I don't think he's ever really the one to blame for how his episodes are, because his episodes struggle in the writing and the budget and the costume and the production, and his performance always shines, where it's like, oh no, you feel like the Doctor. This is a fun, weird version of him where he's an ass, and I kind of like it.
Yeah, that's the whole idea. The Doctor's kind of just gone crazy after the last regeneration being poisoned like that.
Yeah, it's fun. I like him. I like him. I do understand the negativity towards him when he was the Doctor, because it is such a departure from, like, you know, Peter Davidson's Doctor, where he was like a charming, like, oh, let's play cricket type of guy. But it was. I think it's fun, and I like it when Doctor Who tries new things, and this is like, especially with the Doctor, like when they try new things with the Doctor, it always becomes much more interesting.
And you know, going back to Patrick Troughton, it is cool that they don't ever meet, because Patrick Troughton doesn't outshine Colin Baker, and Colin Baker doesn't outshine Patrick Troughton. They're just kind of equals in this episode, honestly. And you know, Patrick Troughton steps back into a role. He's kind of a lead for the first time in 15 years, and he just steps right back in, and he's perfect playing the Doctor again. I think Fraser Hines is great as Jamie in this episode as well. I think he does suffer in the location scenes because they were shot first, and you can kind of feel in episodes 2 and 3 that he's kind of just finding his way back into the Jamie character. But Patrick Troughton is just fantastic in this episode. You can kind of feel he's an older man. He's kind of less energetic, but he's still the Doctor, really. He still feels like his Doctor. He manages to bring that persona back, like, almost flawlessly. Again, the only thing that lets it down is the goddamn hair. If he had his hair, I would not notice that he's even, like, acting a little bit older. You know,
but season 6B, whatever, like.
Yeah, season 6B. So in between recording this episode, because we recorded it over 2 days, Big Finish announced the next box set of the Second Doctor Adventures, which will see him reunite with Jamie McCrimmon as an older man, decades after his memory got erased in the War Games, which kind of puts a little fork into, a little crinkle into how this works out, because... are we thinking maybe this is Jamie straight after the War Games, and then maybe he goes back to get his memory erased, and then I don't know how it works.
I don't know how, like, maybe he, like, because War Games that's when the Doctor gets forced to regenerate, or when he gets sent away? Because I've not seen it.
Okay, at the end of the episode, companions get their memory erased, and the Doctor goes into a different room, and he can choose which body he wants to regenerate into, and he's like, oh no, that's too fat, that's too old, And then the
Okay.
episode ends with him getting a forced regeneration, maybe, but canon is kind of unclear on whether that's a forced regeneration or if in between if in between scenes he has to go on missions for the Time Lords. It's unclear what's going on there.
Yeah, and I don't know how you would explain Jamie being in this episode if it's blatantly obvious that they wiped his memory in War Games at that moment and they didn't be like, okay, come with us, and then like you don't really see what happens. And
maybe it's explained in the Terrence Dicks books that takes place before this episode, that maybe the Time Lords bring back his memories and send him on a mission with the Doctor again. I don't know. I haven't read the book. I only found out it existed like the other day. So
yeah, it's a confusing bit, but
also in the fucking cover, the Doctor doesn't have white hair.
Of course,
on the cover of a Big Finish release, like he doesn't have white hair, so maybe he dyes his hair.
Yeah, I have no idea, but like that's one of the things, like, you know, Doctor Who lore doesn't need to line up 100%. I think it makes it more interesting because, you know, timey-wimey nonsense, like time travel doesn't make sense anyway, so there's going to be paradoxes and like holes, and I kind of like the Doctor Who lore is so inconsistent and like hard to make sense of that it's like vague. Like you get like, okay, I vaguely can follow a timeline here, even if that timeline isn't exactly a straight line and doesn't exactly connect up because time travel. Like
fucking wait until we start to delve into some of the books and find out how Time Lords are born with these kind of looms or whatever, because there's a book called Lung Barrow which goes into Time Lord mythology, which is obviously contradicted by Chris Chibnall now, and it was contradicted before, but Doctor Who canon is very strange. You have to pick and choose. Even in the show, it's strange. It doesn't make any sense. Such a weird show.
It is such a weird show. I don't know why I like it. That does take us to the end of this episode. Next week, we will be continuing our look through the Two Doctors story with part 2, so you can look forward to that coming out. In the meantime, you can find us on Facebook at Who Watches Who and Twitter at Watches Doctor. The podcast is also available in video form on YouTube at youtube.com/@WhoWatchesWho, where you can see our beautiful faces talking about this. It's also available in audio form wherever you listen to podcasts. There is a lot of links in the description. Use them at your discretion. You can send us an email at whowatcheswhopod@gmail.com, or just leave a comment below on the YouTube, or send us a message on Facebook, or just, you know, get in contact with us if you've got any thoughts on Colin Baker's Doctor or this Doctor Who story, or just in Doctor Who in general, and we will read them out at the end of the month in our monthly news podcast. Anyway, until then, bye.